My fiancé's ex-wife had an emergency, so he left me with his sick son and disappeared for a week. He called a week later to tell me that he won't be coming back. Now his parents have disowned him and gave me his house to live in. I, a 32-year-old woman, have been engaged to my fiancé, a 38-year-old man, for about 8 months now. We've been living together in his house for the past year. He has a 7-year-old son from his previous marriage, who is autistic and often sick. The boy needs a lot of special care and attention. Last week my fiancé got a call from his ex-wife. She lives in another state, about a 6-hour drive away. He told me there was some kind of emergency and he needed to go help her. I was surprised because they don't usually have much contact beyond discussing their son's care, but I understood that emergencies happen, so I said okay. He left that same day saying he'd probably be back in 2 to 3 days. It's now been a week and he's still not back. I've been calling him every day, and he always says the same thing, that it's taking longer than expected and he'll be back soon, but he never gives me any details about what's actually going on. Meanwhile, I'm here alone taking care of his son. It's really hard. I care about the boy, but I'm not trained to handle his special needs. He has meltdowns that I don't know how to manage. He needs help with basic tasks that I'm not always sure how to do right, and he's been sick with a fever for the past couple of days, which is scary because I don't know his medical history well. I'm getting more frustrated and worried each day. Why won't my fiancé tell me what the emergency is? Why is it taking so long? I'm starting to wonder if there's really an emergency at all or if something else is going on. I've tried asking him directly what the problem is, but he just gives vague answers, like it's complicated or I'll explain when I get back. I'm not sure what to think. Part of me is worried that something serious has happened and he's protecting me from bad news, but another part of me is suspicious that he might be lying about the whole thing. I'm exhausted from taking care of his son 24/7. I love the boy, but this is way more than I signed up for. I'm not his parent, and I don't feel equipped to be his sole caregiver for an extended period. I'm scared I might mess up and do something wrong. I'm also hurt that my fiancé doesn't seem to understand how difficult this is for me. He barely asks how we're doing when I call. He hasn't offered to come back or send someone else to help. It's like he's forgotten about us. I don't know what to do. I can't leave his son alone, but I'm at my wit's end. I'm considering calling my fiancé's parents to see if they can come help, but I'm worried about overstepping or causing drama. I also don't want to embarrass my fiancé if there really is a serious situation he's dealing with. Am I overreacting? Should I be more patient, or is this as weird as it feels to me? I'm starting to question our whole relationship. If he can just leave us like this with no explanation, what does that say about his commitment to me and our future? I could really use some advice. Has anyone been in a similar situation? What should I do? Wow, this blew up overnight. Thank you all for your responses and support. I'll try to answer some common questions. Yes, I've tried texting him too. He responds but with the same vague answers. No, I don't have contact info for his ex-wife. I've never met her. His son is in special education, but school is out for summer break right now. I work from home part-time, which is how I've been managing to care for him 24/7. My fiancé and I have been together for 2 years total. I've known his son for most of that time, but I've never been left alone with him for more than a day before. A lot of you are suggesting I call the police in his ex-wife's city to do a welfare check. I'm considering it, but I'm scared of causing problems if there really is a family emergency happening. I think I'm going to give him one more day to give me a real explanation. If he doesn't, I'll try calling his parents first, then consider calling the police. Some of you have asked for more background on our relationship and his previous marriage. I'll share what I know. My fiancé and his ex-wife were married for 9 years. They divorced when their son was 4. From what he's told me, the stress of caring for a special needs child was a big factor in their split. His ex-wife struggled with depression and felt overwhelmed. They tried counseling, but ultimately decided to separate. The divorce wasn't super messy, but it wasn't exactly amicable either. They disagreed a lot about their son's care and custody arrangements. Eventually, they settled on my fiancé having primary custody, with his ex getting visitation 1 weekend a month and for a week during summer and winter breaks. My fiancé told me that his ex-wife loves their son but has a hard time coping with his needs. That's why she agreed to less custody. She pays child support, but often late. My fiancé doesn't like to talk about her much, but he's mentioned that she's had some personal struggles since the divorce. I got the impression he meant mental health or maybe substance issues, but he never gave details. When I met my fiancé, he had been divorced for about a year. He was upfront about having a special needs child and made sure I understood what I was getting into. I've always known that his son is his top priority, which I respect. It's one of the things I love about him. He's an amazing, devoted father. Our relationship progressed pretty quickly. We moved in together after dating for a year, and he proposed 4 months after that. Things have been good overall. He's kind, hardworking, and treats me well. We've had some challenges adjusting to life as a blended family, but nothing major until now. That's why the situation is so confusing and hurtful. It's completely out of character for him to be so uncommunicative and to leave us like this. I keep wondering if I've missed some signs or red flags along the way. A few more details about his son since many have asked. He's 7 years old and nonverbal. He communicates mainly through a tablet app and some basic signs. He's prone to meltdowns when his routine is disrupted or when he's overstimulated. He has several food allergies and sensitivities that require a special diet. He also has epilepsy, which is mostly controlled with medication, but still leads to occasional seizures. Physically, he's small for his age and has some motor skills delays. He needs help with things like bathing, dressing, and using the bathroom. He wears pull-ups at night and sometimes during the day if we're going out for a long time. He goes to a special education program during the school year which provides speech therapy, occupational therapy, and other services. When he's home, he usually needs constant supervision. He has trouble sleeping and often wakes up multiple times a night. I've helped care for him before, but always with my fiancé present. This is my first time being solely responsible for him, and it's overwhelming. I'm terrified of doing something wrong or missing a sign that he needs medical attention. Some people have suggested I call his doctor or therapist for advice. That's a good idea, and I think I'll do that today. I'm going to make a list of all his care providers and see if I can get some guidance. I'm still unsure about the next steps with my fiancé. Part of me wants to give him the benefit of the doubt, but another part feels like this is unforgivable, regardless of the reason. I'm going to sleep on it and decide in the morning whether to call his parents or the police. Thank you again for all your advice and support. I'll update when I have more information. Update. I have an update, but it's not good news. I finally broke down and called my fiancé's parents this morning. They had no idea he was even out of town. They were shocked and immediately drove over to help with their grandson. While they were on their way, I decided to bite the bullet and call the police department in his ex-wife's city to request a welfare check. The officer I spoke to was very understanding and said they'd send someone to her address. About an hour later, the police called me back. They said they made contact with both my fiancé and his ex-wife. Both are fine, there is no emergency. The officer couldn't give me more details due to privacy laws, but he emphasized that there was no evidence of any crime or danger. I was processing this information with my future in-laws when my fiancé finally called. He said he knew I must be upset and confused and that he was coming home immediately to explain everything in person. He asked me not to make any decisions until we could talk face to face. I don't know what to think. I'm relieved that he's okay, but I'm also furious and hurt. What possible explanation could there be for abandoning us like this? His parents are just as confused and upset as I am. They've offered to stay with us until he gets back, which should be late tonight. I'm grateful for their help with their grandson, but I'm dreading the conversation to come. I feel like our entire relationship has been called into question. I'll update again after we talk. Thank you all for your support during this crazy situation. Update. I've been staring at my screen for hours, trying to find the right words to explain what's happened. My hands are shaking as I type this, and I still can't quite believe it's real. But I promised to update you all, so here goes. Last night, instead of coming home as he'd promised, my fiancé called. I answered immediately, relief flooding through me at the sight of his name on my phone. That relief was short-lived. I'm not coming home, he said, his voice oddly calm. I'm staying here with Sarah. Sarah, his ex-wife, the woman he'd claimed needed emergency help. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. What do you mean you're not coming home? I managed to choke out. What about your son? What about us? There was a long pause before he spoke again. Sarah and I have decided to give our marriage another try. We've reconnected over the past week, and we both feel like this is the right thing to do. I couldn't breathe. This couldn't be happening. But your son, I stammered. He needs you. He's autistic. He needs stability and routine. You can't just leave him. Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost ashamed. We've talked about it, and we feel it would be too difficult to care for a child with such high needs while we're rebuilding our relationship. We think it's best if he stays with you and my parents for now. I saw red. The man I thought I knew, the devoted father I'd fallen in love with, would never say something like this, would never abandon his child, especially one with special needs. You're leaving your autistic son because he's inconvenient to your new life plans? I hissed, fury replacing my shock. Who are you? I don't even recognize you right now. He tried to explain, to justify his actions, but I wasn't hearing it. I let him know exactly how disgusted and hurt I was. I called him a coward, a terrible father, a liar. I told him I would be informing the authorities about his abandonment of his son. You can't do that, he protested weakly. Watch me, I snapped and hung up. I sat there in stunned silence for a few minutes, my mind reeling, then I heard a small voice behind me. Where's Daddy? I turned to see my fiancé's son standing in the doorway, clutching his tablet. My heart broke all over again. How was I going to explain this to him? I managed to get him back to bed with vague reassurances that Daddy would be home soon. It felt like a lie, but I didn't know what else to say. Once he was asleep, I called my fiancé's parents. They arrived an hour later, looking worried and confused. I sat them down and told them everything. His mother broke down crying while his father's face turned redder and redder as I spoke. What about his son? His father thundered when I finished. That it would be too difficult? I'll show him difficult. His mother was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. I don't understand, she kept saying. This isn't like him at all. He loves that boy more than anything. We stayed up most of the night, alternating between anger, confusion, and grief. By morning we had a plan. First thing, we went to the police station. The officers were very concerned when we explained the situation. They took detailed statements from all of us and said they would be opening an investigation into child abandonment. We take cases involving special needs children very seriously, the detective assured us. We'll be looking into this thoroughly. Next, we met with a lawyer to discuss custody options. Since my fiancé and I weren't married, I had no legal rights to his son. His parents, however, could file for emergency custody as next of kin. The lawyer started the paperwork immediately. Throughout all of this, my phone was blowing up with messages and missed calls from my fiancé. I ignored them all. I couldn't bear to hear his voice or read his excuses. When we got home, his parents sat me down at the kitchen table. They looked exhausted and heartbroken, but there was a steely determination in their eyes. We've made a decision, his father said, his voice gruff with emotion. We're disowning him. I blinked in surprise. Are you sure? That's a big step. His mother nodded, wiping away a tear. We can't condone what he's done. Abandoning his child, lying to all of us, it's unforgivable. We don't want anything to do with someone who would do that, even if he is our son. We raised him better than this, his father added. I don't know what's gotten into him, but I do know I can't call someone who would abandon their special needs child my son. I nodded, understanding their pain and anger all too well. We also wanted to talk to you about the house and our grandson, his mother continued. We want you to stay here as long as you need to. We know this has been a huge shock, and we don't want you to have to worry about finding a new place on top of everything else. I started to protest, but she held up a hand to stop me. Please let us do this. You've been so good to our grandson, and we know he trusts you. We think it would be best if he stays here with you for now, where things are familiar. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. Their kindness was overwhelming, especially in the midst of their own pain. Thank you, I managed to whisper. The next few days were a blur of activity. We had meetings with social workers, more talks with lawyers, and lots of conversations with my ex-fiancé's son, trying to explain what was happening in terms he could understand. It was heartbreaking to see his confusion and distress. He kept asking for his daddy, not understanding why he wasn't coming home. We did our best to comfort him, but how do you explain to a 7-year-old autistic child that his father has abandoned him? My ex continued to call and text. I finally read some of his messages. They were a mixture of apologies, justifications, and pleas for understanding. He said he still loved his son but felt this was for the best. He said he and Sarah were planning to move to another state for a fresh start. He asked me not to tell the authorities, saying it would only complicate things. I didn't respond to any of it. Instead, I forwarded all the messages to the detective handling the case. As the days turned into weeks, we settled into a new routine. My ex's parents came over every day to help with their grandson. We worked together to maintain his schedule as much as possible, knowing how important routine was for him. I threw myself into learning everything I could about caring for a child with autism. I read books, joined online support groups, and had long talks with his doctors and therapists. It was overwhelming at times, but I was determined to do right by this little boy who had been through so much. His grandparents were amazing through it all. They were there for every meltdown, every sleepless night, every small victory. They never complained, even though I knew they were still processing their own grief and anger over their son's actions. One night, about a month after everything happened, I was sitting on the porch after finally getting my ex's son to sleep. His grandmother came out and sat beside me. "How are you holding up, dear?" she asked gently. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I'm managing. It's hard, but we're getting there." She nodded, patting my hand. "You're doing an amazing job. We can't thank you enough for sticking by our grandson through all of this." I felt tears pricking at my eyes. "I love him," I said simply. I couldn't imagine walking away, no matter how hard it gets. She smiled sadly. "That's what being a parent is all about. It's a shame our son couldn't understand that." We sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the stars come out. "Have you heard anything more from him?" she asked eventually. I shook my head. "And not since last week. He sent another long email trying to explain himself." I didn't respond. She sighed heavily. "I never thought I'd say this about my own child, but I'm glad he made his choice, and now he has to live with the consequences." I nodded, feeling a mix of sadness and anger. I keep wondering if there were signs I missed, if I should have seen this coming somehow. She squeezed my hand. "Don't do that to yourself. None of us saw this coming. He fooled all of us." As we sat there, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed in such a short time. A month ago, I thought I knew what my future looked like. I was going to marry a man I loved, be a stepmother to his special needs son, and build a life together. Now that future was gone. In its place was something I never could have imagined. I was living in my ex-fiancé's house, helping to raise his son alongside his parents. My days were filled with therapy appointments, meltdown management, and countless small challenges. It wasn't the life I had planned, but as I sat there on the porch, I realized it was a life I was coming to love. This little boy who had been abandoned by his own father had stolen my heart completely. His grandparents, who had every right to walk away from this mess, had instead embraced me as family. Yes, there was still pain. Yes, there were still moments when I wanted to scream at the unfairness of it all. But there was also love and purpose, and a sense of belonging I hadn't expected to find in the aftermath of such betrayal. As for my ex-fiancé, I've heard through the grapevine that he and his ex-wife did indeed move out of state. The police investigation is ongoing, and there will likely be legal consequences for his actions. Part of me hopes he'll face justice for what he's done, but mostly I just hope he stays away. His son deserves better, and we're all determined to give him the love and stability he needs. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand why my ex did what he did. But I do know that I'm exactly where I need to be right now, helping to care for a little boy who deserves all the love in the world. Thank you all for your support throughout this incredibly difficult time. Your kind words and advice have meant more than you know. I may not update again for a while, as I want to focus on our new family dynamic and giving my ex's son all the attention he needs, but know that your support has made a real difference in our lives.